Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is Alex Niedermeyer. I hope you all are doing well today. Very glad to see you all here this morning or this afternoon for you. So just a couple of technology reminders for you. So all participants are muted. If you are presenting today and I have not yet promoted you to be a panelist so that you can use your mic and video, please do feel free to message me on the chat. A few other reminders: you're welcome to change your view, how you see the presentations and people's use of video, using some of the features in Zoom. The third thing is for the Q&A. We ask that if you have questions for the presenters, that you do please share those. Those are great to have. Do use the Q&A button if you can, so that is separate from the chat. And then in that way, we can answer your questions in real time and have a log of the questions that were asked. If you can also please identify which presenter your question is for, that would be very helpful. So thanks for that. And then finally, the chat feature. So please feel free to send any information, introduce yourself, if you'd like to, share resources and connect with your fellow participants. I will also be sending in the chat a link for a Google Doc with biographies of all of the participants of the conference who we have information for. So please feel free to shoot me a message if you have any questions or having any issues. And we look forward to a great presentation today. So with that, I will hand it over to our moderator.
Hello, hi. I hope everyone can hear me. Thanks a lot, Alex. So we'll just wait for two more of our presenters to join us. They should be joining in a couple of seconds. So we'll just give them that time to join in. But yeah, just good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for coming again today. We look forward to your participation in today's meeting as well. As we saw yesterday, we're focusing on land and natural resource governance in Zambia. So we're really happy to be having those conversations, and we have this platform to be able to continue these conversations despite not being able to meet physically. So yesterday, for those of you who joined us, we had a very interesting opening where we heard from USAID, the House of Chiefs, Ministry of Lands, the Ministry of Local Government. We had the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, as well as the Forestry Department at the Ministry of Lands. And they touched on quite a number of aspects of legislation and policy formulation, as well as implementation on land and resource governance, both for state and customary land as well. We also had discussions from the Ministry of Local Government around integrated development plans, as well as the protection of wildlife and forests from the Forestry Department. So, as you know, this symposium is being organized by USAID, Integrated Land and Resource Governance Program. So the program provides support in the development and implementation of targeted, discrete interventions, achieving women's economic empowerment, and looks at quite a number of issues that include productivity, agricultural productivity that is, as well as food security. It also looks at strengthening biodiversity, conservation, and sustainable natural resources management. So this symposium has been running for a couple of years now. So in its third year, the objective is obviously to share evidence on land and resource governance experiences in Zambia that will inform policy and improve field implementation. So we hope that this symposium will serve as a platform for the consolidation of research information and also to identify gaps in land tenure and resource governance in the country. We hope that this will obviously be done through examining some of the experiences that we'll listen to, obviously starting yesterday and also from today's presentations and the ones that are coming for the next couple of weeks. so that we look at the experiences from the partners on the ground, what is actually going on, how do we examine the land issues in a much more holistic and integrated manner, and to identify some of the enablers and barriers to policy implementation. But also, most importantly for this symposium is to spur conversations. We don't want these conversations to end here. These discussions to come to a close when the symposium closes. So we hope that the conversations that we start here will continue beyond the symposium, and will lead to further collaborations, especially amongst the researchers in the field. As you may have noticed yesterday and also today, we have a list of participants, quite a number of them. And we have bios as well, so they've just given a brief on the kind of work that they do within the land and resource governance sector. So please have a look at that Google file, and yeah, we hope that more collaborations may arise from that. Now, moving on to today's discussions. Today we're focusing on governance and on state and as well as customary land. Now, we all agree that the adoption of appropriate land governance tools is quite cardinal for the efficient and effective delivery of land for all. Appropriate land governance tools will also help improve tenure security and secure land rights, especially for some of the most vulnerable groups who depend on land directly for their livelihood. So today we have 4 presentations focusing on varying aspects of land governance, and our discussions will center on large-scale land acquisitions and investments and the extractive industry, and also on the adjudication of land disputes in Zambia. To kick off this discussion, I will ask Dr. Andrew Chilombo to just come in and talk to us about multi-level governance of large-scale land acquisitions, and he takes a case study of the institutional politics of scale of the farm block program in Zambia. Now, Dr. Chilombo is currently consulting with the United Nations Environment Program on environment and natural resource projects in West Africa. He did an interdisciplinary PhD in the School of Geosciences at the University of Edinburgh. But before his PhD, he worked for the Global Environment Facility at the World Bank Group in Washington, D.C. So as he starts his presentation, I'd like to encourage everyone to please, if you have any questions for him, indicate that the question is directed towards Dr. Chilombo within the Q&A platform, and we'll be able to ask him those questions at the end of his presentation and as we wrap up the symposium later today. So Dr. Chilombo, please take it away.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you very much, Chilombo, for the introduction. So in contribution to the thematic area of this year's symposium, I'm going to talk to you about the level governance of large-scale land acquisitions in Zambia. And I'm looking at the institutional politics of scale of the large farm block program in the country. To kick off with the presentation, I will first of all focus on a little bit about the background and context, and then swing on to talking about the phenomenon of large-scale land acquisitions in Zambia, before a couple of words on the theory and methodology that underpinned this research. And then finally, I'll also give some results and personal reflections on the results of this research. Next slide, please. So understanding land tenure system, actually in the next 8 years, we should have something very important to celebrate land governance in the country, because our land tenure system in the country will be at least 100 years old. So the first land tenure system in the country was started in 1928 by a British governor who divided our land into 2 parts. One was the Crown land, and the second one was reserve native land. And just to kind of maybe fast forward a little bit, if you want to understand land tenure system in Zambia, we need to look at 6 important dates in the history of a land tenure system. The first one is 1928, which I just mentioned, when land was divided into Crown land as well as reserve native land. And then 1947, when there was native trust order that gave birth to what was then known as trust land, which was in the magnitude of about 40.5 million hectares of land. And then in 1964, what was known as Crown land in 1928 became state land as we know it today. And then in 1970, there was what was known as the Land Acquisition Act, which was part of the Zambianization program that you might have known about. And then in 1975, taking hold of the momentum that was created by the 1970 Land Acquisition Act, there was a repeal that instituted that no land could be leased to anybody. And then in 1995, the Second Republican government thought the 1975 Land Act was preventing the land market, which is a hindrance to investments in land. And therefore, there was a repeal that sort of saw the liberalization of land markets in the country. And following on the 1995 Land Act, there has been a surge in the interest in the land in the country. And this is what now has become to be known as large-scale land acquisitions. And it has become a phenomenon of great interest to policymakers, development partners, civil society organizations, and for us researchers. Essentially because these large-scale land acquisitions are meant for food security, particularly in countries where the climate is very harsh, but also following the global crunch, some business entities are thinking investing in land is a good investment opportunity because land never loses value. But also large-scale land acquisitions are also associated with conservation interests. So there are multiple reasons as to why there is this surge in large-scale land acquisitions. Now, I mentioned that this has also triggered interest among the academia. And broadly, understanding this as focused on property regimes and the role of the state, the elite capture, the power imbalances, if you will, the political ecology of large-scale land acquisitions, as well as land alienation processes. However, there has been suggestions that when investors want to invest in a country, they usually target countries where the land governance system is weak, so that it's easier for them to be able to acquire land. Other researchers say actually it's the opposite, because investors who are serious, they want to go to countries where land governance is strong so that their investments are protected. So the point of debate has always been, what is the role, therefore, of institutional policies in shaping outcomes of large-scale land acquisition in host countries? In contribution to this gap, if you will, or this debate, I did a research, and the aim was to assess how land governance institutional structures in Zambia interplay with large-scale land acquisition deals. And I focused on the role of formal and informal institutions, drawing on the Nasanga Farm Block. And Nasanga Farm Block, as probably some of you may know, is part of the 2002 government agricultural policy to commercialize agriculture in the country, across the country. And that saw the government decree to establish in the then 9 provinces at least one farm block program. Next slide, please. So I looked at the land matrix data, which is public data, if you will, if you want to consult it. And I just wanted to have an idea of how large-scale land acquisitions in Zambia as deals have been evolving. And as you can see, from the northern tip to the southern tip, there's some kind of a tendency to see the deals aligned along the rail line. And in other parts of the country as well, a little bit dotted, but in other parts, pretty much nothing. But I must mention that the data, the information displayed on the map on the right indicates the interest that investors expressed in investing in the country. It does not represent actual implementation of large-scale land deals. And on the left, to have a sense of who is actually interested in investing in Zambia, so the data was showing that at least the vast majority of investors are coming from Europe, followed by North America, and then let's say joint deals between European and Asian investors. And then we have Zambian investors and foreigners unnamed. And then there was only a paltry share of Zambia's investors, about 2,000,000 hectares of land. And then you have also South and Africa and South American joint ventures. I must also mention that the deals that you are seeing on the map, these are deals involving more than 200 hectares of land and not less. However, there are a lot more of these deals which are between 0 and 200 hectares of land. Next slide, please. Yeah, so looking at the land tenure system, we have customary land as well as state land. And state land is under the administration of the president, who is represented by the Commission of Land. And the traditional customary land is, of course, in the hands of traditional leaders. Yesterday was kind of remarkable in the sense that we had one of the Royal Highnesses who presented, I think, highlighting the stakeholdership that traditional leadership has in the governance of land in Zambia. And so I thought multi-level governance is very, very appropriate to be able to use as a lens to be able to understand the interplay between large-scale land acquisitions and institutional structures in the country. And then Matt, who was moderating yesterday, made a very important point as well when he asked the Royal Highness, are there cases in Zambia that could be good representatives of what is working actually in the country? And so my approach was, let's look at the policy instruments. Actually, Matt mentioned that, we have very good structures in terms of policies in the country. And Mr. Makumba, in his presentation yesterday as well, I think mentioned what Zambia is actually pioneering on the global stage of how to do decentralization so that communities can actually get the best deal in resources. But this is on the policy side of things, on the documents. What is it that is happening on the ground? So my point was mixing what is in the policy instrument as well as getting on the ground to be able to see what is happening, discussing with the communities who are actually experts of the experiences of these large-scale land acquisitions would give a much more comprehensive picture of actually how we can understand the interplay between large-scale land acquisitions as well as the institutional structures. So next slide, please.
Andrew, thank you so much for referring to yesterday's presentations. It ties in quite well with what you're talking about today. Just a quick reminder that you have 7 minutes to go in this presentation.
10 minutes, you said? I'll be done by then, no worries. So that gets me to the results. And overall, the large-scale land acquisition policy interplay in Zambia is plagued with national, economic, and institutional challenges that unfortunately are linked to national party politics. That's a very big statement. I will try to unpack it within the next couple of seconds. So what does that overall mean? First of all, Zambia has bitten off more than she can chew. By that, I mean the level institutional frameworks and policies that are promoting large-scale land acquisition deals is not matched by the equivalent level of managing those large-scale land acquisition deals. What that means actually is, for example, there is the Zambia Development Agency, but there's also the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC, that are government quasi-institutions to promote private investments, but also public-private investments, respectively, in the country. However, if you go to the ZDA, Zambia Development Agency, and ask, what is happening on the ground? How many investors do we have that have passed through you? The answer is not automatic. If you go to Zambia Environmental Management Agency, who are mandated to ensure that every development project in the country has an environmental impact assessment. That it is not just to be submitted, but also there has to be a follow-up to make sure that there is adherence to the environmental recommendations. Zambia Environmental Management Agency will gladly accept that they try to do their best, but they do not have enough resources to be able to go on the ground to inspect exactly what is happening. Not across the whole country. In some places they do, but not everywhere. If you go to the Office of the President, Department of Resettlement, and ask them, what kind of help do you give to resettled families? They are going to tell you, we do not have enough resources, and we wait for the victims or other interested parties to report to us so that we can act. So we have taken in more than we can actually manage. The second point is there's a lot of party meddling in the national land governance system. Corruption is one of the cases, but also underfunding to the agricultural sector. A couple of years ago, a minister of agriculture was quoted in the media saying part of the budget that was allocated to agriculture was cut because they wanted to use part of the funds to developing other projects, usually construction projects. So if you want to commercialize the agriculture sector to make it profitable and an economic activity that should benefit not just the big people, but also small scale farmers, we do not have to play this game. Third point, there's also overriding of key decisions by government institutions with a legal mandate. And I think a case in point here is the Forest 27, where I think clearly there was the technical sound advice that it was a bad idea to be able to develop that area. But apparently the development of the area has gone on. And the second example we could give is the mining in the Lower Zambezi National Park. The third point is also colorism, which I think in our context of Zambia, I've defined as the unruly and unlawful yet tolerated behavior by political party sympathizers, particularly the unemployed youth. The cases of these so-called political cadres giving land to people illegally, I think the cases are quite rampant in the country, and there's a lot of evidence in the newspaper or on TV, yet there's nothing that's being done against that. The third point that impacts the overall large-scale land acquisition and policy interplay in Zambia is there is no land market in the country, and there is no certainty about the value of land as a whole. For example, in 2009, the World Bank published a very influential document called Awakening Africa's Sleeping Giant, and Zambia, DRC, and Nigeria were mentioned as countries that could potentially spur local development, just like Brazil did in Cerrado, or Thailand in northeastern part of the country. And in this document, the World Bank said Zambia has about 68% of the total mass, which is customary land. A more recent study of 1916 said actually Zambia has about 51 to 54% of customary land. This was 4 years ago. In 2020, I don't know how much land we have that is customary, but yet we still have investors coming to invest in land. And the fourth point is traditional chiefs, the local councils, and commission of lands. These represent the level governance structures in the country. So we can talk about macro, which is the commission of land, and then the meso, which is the local councils, and the traditional leaders as the micro level governance structures in the country. Unfortunately, corruption is perceived to be the most rampant at these three levels. Next slide, please. So combining field research and consultations with various stakeholders, this is about how acquisition of land in Zambia happens. So on the right, you have state land, formal institutions, and on the right, you have informal institutions, customary land. And so if you want to acquire customary land, you follow that process. You can go to the senior chief immediately straight away, or you pass through the village head who's called the sultani. And if you want to acquire state land, you can either go to Republican president, you can either go, or you go to ZTA or IDC, or the Commission of Land, or the local councils, and the process just goes like that. And if you acquire land using the informal institutions, you're going to acquire land, but without title deeds. And if you do own the state land, then you're going to have title deeds. And as I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, so the figures with red linings outside, these are the areas or the nodes in the acquisition process where people think this is where the problem is in terms of corruption. Next slide, please. So when you look at the policy documents, Zambia is replete with so many factors that as an institution, as a government, they try to put forward in order to justify large-scale land acquisitions or land-based investments in the country. These include rural development, which is actually the highest, like the most important factor according to the government. And then there's also commercialization of agriculture, but also that we need to be a food basket for the region, which is food security. And then when we commercialize agriculture, we are going to reduce rural poverty. This is also that, for example, 40% of freshwater resources in the whole of Southern Africa are found in Zambia, which is more than a lion's share among wolves. And then also we have that the political and policy environment in the country is very, very conducive. We have no wars. Our democracy works to some extent. And then the socioeconomic situation also is good enough. We have a lot of young people who are potential providers of local, labor. And the government also argues that, when we commercialize agriculture and we improve local conditions in rural areas, this is going to curb the rural-urban migration. And on the far right, left, those are the documents that I looked at to be able to come up with these results. And I guess this is the last slide. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Andrew. You highlight quite a number of points where you talk about the inefficiencies of in the management of large-scale land acquisitions. You highlight corruption and underfunding in the agriculture sector, cadreism, no land market, and also you talked about an uncoordinated land acquisition process that obviously makes all of this quite difficult to coordinate and to ensure that there's more efficiency in the delivery of land, especially at such a large scale. But I think most importantly, you've talked about the interplay between formal and informal institutions. I think that's quite important. But then how do we ensure that all these actors who participate in this process act in a coordinated manner? And also, what tools can we use to ensure a more seamless and transparent mechanism in land acquisitions, especially where the lives of local communities are likely to be disrupted? So, yeah, very interesting presentation there. We'll come back to that. Obviously, there are questions from attendees. Just a reminder, please type in your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentations, and let us know who your presentation is addressed to. But then we move on to our next presentation. Dr. Chewen Konde joins us from the University of Zambia. He is a faculty member in the Department of Agriculture, Economics and Extension. Prior to joining the university, he worked for the private sector and NGOs in areas such as farmer capacity building, marketing and trade facilitation, and project management. At the university, he is involved in teaching, research, and community service. And he currently teaches on undergraduate and master's levels. And his research and outreach work is in agriculture market analysis, land distribution issues, and farm structure change, as well as food and nutrition security. Today, his presentation explores the impacts of large-scale agriculture investments, and he presents early evidence from an outgrower program in Zambia. And I think it will be interesting to see the conversations that Andrew and Chewe will have based on the focus of their presentations. So, Chewe, you can go ahead with your presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Chilombo, for that introduction. And I really enjoyed the previous presentation. It was really, really a great presentation. I hope that the next one will also elicit some very interesting discussion. To begin with, as you already introduced, my topic is on the impacts of large-scale agricultural investments, early evidence from an outgrower program in Zambia. This is more of a micro-level study that was conducted by 3 organizations, the German Development Institute, the Institute for Global and Area Studies, and obviously the University of Zambia, where I'm involved. And there are 4 of us who were part of this study. You can see the names on that particular slide. Next slide, please. As already explained by Dr. Chilombo earlier, I mean, there's a lot of interesting data that we have, even on the land metrics, the public database on land deals that we have currently. And it demonstrates that basically large-scale land acquisitions, including agricultural-based investments, have increased rapidly over the years. Just recently, I managed to get some data from the land matrix, which shows that over 80 million hectares globally have undergone some kind of deals, and these are the size of concluded large-scale land acquisitions that have already been concluded. In Africa, more than 13 million. In Zambia alone, more than 1.2 million hectares of land that have been concluded with respect to the deals. Now, this obviously has elicited a lot of interest in trying to find out what are the impacts of this particular large scale, especially those ones which are involved in agriculture. And a lot has been done on this, and the results do not seem to be unanimous on anything. They're quite ambiguous in most cases. And also it depends on the terms of inclusion, basically the level of engagement that those investments have with the communities around them. Some of them suggest that things haven't really worked out very well. Others seem to suggest that things are pretty much helping the communities that live around the areas where the investments have been established. Next slide, please. Now, this study that I'm talking about was basically a study that was interested in seeing one of the case studies in this case, the Amathion agri-investment in Mumbwa and Chibombo. So basically, Amathion is a German investment with a Zambian subsidiary, and they also have other investments in other countries. But in Zambia, they have been around now for almost since 2011, 2012, thereabout. And they are perceived to a best practice investment, primarily because they have been quite heavily involved with the community around the Mumbwa area. And because they have also been helping with, upgrading the schools there, providing facilities like, water facilities in some of the communities. And the other thing is that, this particular investment really stemmed from purchasing land that was already in state land in most cases, with farmers who were in what they call the big concession. And so most of this land was under title. However, they still went into Chief Kaindu's area because this particular investment is more than 40,000 hectares. And so they had to purchase land also in Chief Kaindu's area, or got some land from the customary land. But the bulk of the land is perceived to have come from those farmers who were in the big concession who decided to sell the land to Amathion. The other thing that is with them is that they also established an outgrower scheme, essentially where now they were engaging the community in economic activities, essentially to say, okay, listen, if you want to improve on your market participation, we will be able to buy some of your produce. You can also sell some of your livestock to us. So there was that idea of trying to engage the farmers a little bit more so that the farmers who live in and around the Amathion area are also benefiting from what is happening in terms of the developments by the investment. Next slide, please. So as a team, which involved, like I mentioned, the German Development Institute, the Institute for Global and Area Studies, as well as the University of Zambia, we were engaged to undertake a study which had a quantitative aspect to it, basically a household survey, and a qualitative. I'll spend more time talking about just a few insights from the quantitative part of the study, and not so much from the qualitative one. So using a household survey of 800 farming households, which was in Mumbwa and also Chibombo. And Chibombo comes in here because Amathion decided to extend its outreach, not just to the community in and around the Mumbwa area, but they also started working with farmers in the areas in Chibombo, closer to Mumbwa, basically, because those are the two districts that are kind of next to their neighboring districts. And so they extended their work to establish what they were calling depots in that area, where they were involved in supplying inputs as well as buying some of the produce from the farmers. So our study had two main objectives. First one, basically to assess the overall performance of this particular grower program that they had established. And to do that, we were interested in understanding issues of participation in training, because they were training farmers. To what extent are the farmers in and around the area participating in the trainings being provided by Amathion? The other aspect or the dimension to our study was to look at the issue of the input loans that they were providing. How many farmers are actually getting these input loans? How effective are these input loans really reaching the farmers that are being targeted? So that was the other thing that was focused with respect to this particular study. Then we're also interested in the issue of output market participation, because one of the promises that Amathion put across was to say farmers who are producing soybean or maize could sell their output, their produce to Amathion and principally fetch good prices and maybe cut out transaction costs that are related with agricultural markets. And so that was the idea behind establishing this particular grower scheme. And so we wanted to investigate that particular aspect as well. Then second of all, in terms of the overall objectives, we're also interested in understanding or estimating the impacts of the grower scheme on farmers, specifically looking at the issue of them taking up conservation agriculture, because that was a key aspect of what Amathion was promoting. Second of all, we wanted to understand how or to what extent are these farmers using improved varieties and inputs, and varieties in the sense of crop varieties that were being promoted by Amathion, including maize and soybean and cowpea as well. And the last thing was, at the end of the day, we were interested in the livelihood impacts. And so income was one aspect that we looked at, and wanted to understand to what extent the outgrower scheme is addressing those income issues with the smallholder farmers. Next slide, please. So, I mean, obviously it's a very summarized version of what our work is on, and I believe at the later stage, once our report is finally put together and everything's finished, we are willing to share the report with you, because we're still trying to work on it and improve on certain aspects of the report. But one thing that came out in terms of the overall performance was that with respect to training, generally in both districts, Mumbwa and Chibombo, quite a number of smallholder farmers in the areas where they were targeting had participated in training that was being provided by Amathion. So generally saying that training was quite a success in terms of what Amathion was doing. Training farmers on issues to do with agribusiness, I mean, issues to do with conservation agriculture, issues to do with pesticide management, different aspects of agricultural production, essentially. But one thing that was kind of what came out clearly, and this is over a period of, let's say, 4 or 5 years, we noticed that, or we were able to observe that very few farmers have really participated in the input loan that the scheme has been providing. Only about 11% in Mumbwa and 6% in Chibombo, which was not a very, very good indication. Then in terms of selling grains, again, in Mumbwa, there was more than half of the farmers who were participating in whatever activities Amathion was doing had actually managed to sell grain to Amathion at some point during the 5-year period that we were looking at, beginning 2013 to 2018, thereabout. But obviously this number reduced in the season that we were interested in, which is the 2016-2017 season, primarily because there were some other issues that emerged during that particular time. And then in Chibombo, again, there we noticed that in terms of the participation in grain sales, only 18% had done so. Again, not a very good indicator of what is happening in terms of performance at district level for the program. Next slide, please. Now, this is really the issue that we're more interested in, because obviously we use more rigorous methods, but I'm not going to go into those details. I just want to sort of highlight the key thing. So in terms of the uptake of conservation agriculture, I mean, for those of you who may know what conservation agriculture is, so basically they're what they know called the three non-negotiables of conservation agriculture, and we focus more on issues of minimum soil disturbance, crop residue retention, crop rotation, and then there's also what we call full adoption. So basically, a farmer can adopt one of those three or two of those or all of them. And what came out was that when it comes to conservation agriculture, quite all right, if you compare participants, and what I mean by participants here is those who are actually participating in Amathion activities and versus those who are not. In terms of adoption of minimum soil disturbance, there were 30% higher for participants than the non-participants in terms of adoption. So basically saying that for conservation agriculture, the program probably might be scoring some success, seeing more farmers participate, adopting conservation agriculture in terms of minimum soil disturbance. But when it comes to this issue of crop residue retention, there was no difference between the two groups, those who are participating in the Amathion programs and those who are not. Again, this has remained low for both groups, and you can see that really this is something that is maybe of concern to the Amathion program. And then when it comes to crop rotation, again, there was no difference between the two groups. And what we realized again was that crop rotation generally is high amongst smallholder farmers because this is something that has been inculcated in farmers for a long time, and farmers have really learned how to do that particular practice. But in terms of comparing the two groups, we didn't see any major difference there. When it comes to full adoption of conservation agriculture, meaning that farmers are actually adopting all the three practices that I've talked about above there, we didn't see a major difference between participants and non-participants. And what was also clear was that really the difference, I mean, the adoption of conservation farming or agriculture in totality has really remained low amongst all the groups. With respect to improved varieties and input use, there we noticed that fertilizer and herbicide use was relatively higher for participants, about 30% higher, which was one thing that was pretty clear, and it could be because most of these farmers were also kind of benefiting from whatever inputs were being provided by Amathion, but more importantly, inherently there could be farmers who are better off than the ones who are not participating in the program. But again, that's something that is subject to a lot of discussion as well. But cowpea, which was one of the signature crops that they were promoting, because obviously of the school feeding program, and they were hoping that farmers would supply and then they could supply to schools. We noticed that there was, yes, they were 4% higher than participants, but nothing to really write home about in terms of them doing better than those who are non-participants. When it comes to other crops like groundnut and sunflower, the difference between the groups was nothing really significant or to write home about, really. Interestingly, when it comes to the issue of crop incomes, trying to compare the participants and the non-participants, what came out clearly was that really there was no major difference between the two groups. Basically telling us really that in terms of addressing issues of poverty and income poverty, essentially, you find that the group has really not, the Algoa scheme hasn't really been able to achieve that objective of improving farmers' livelihoods with respect to improving their crop incomes. The next slide, please. So in terms of what was coming out from this study, the key things that we can say, and again, we are, like I've already mentioned, we are still trying to put things together in terms of finalizing our report, is that clearly the program has performed well in terms of providing training to smallholder farmers. I mean, we could clearly see that the structures are put in place and farmers are participating in these trainings, and it seems to be like going well in that aspect. But when it comes to other things that we were looking at, like the issue of adopting conservation agriculture and especially in terms of its full adoption, as well as other aspects, we didn't see much of a difference there, except when we looked at the issue of minimum soil disturbance, the participants did relatively well there, as well as fertilizer and herbicide use. Cowpea, quite right, may have been planted by a few more farmers who are participants than those who are non-participants, but then again there it was only 4% higher than non-participants. Obviously the big question is, so what are the implications of our findings as we have been able to observe from our study? The key thing that is coming out clearly from this particular study is that As Amathion, yes, they talked about enhancing, helping farmers in terms of providing them input support and giving them input loans. But in terms of them scaling up that activity, it wasn't that much. And therefore, if they really want to see more participation on the farmers' side, they need to really enhance the input loan and output markets component, because it seems like those things are there on paper, but they are not actively involved, or at least trying to see those activities really scaling up in the communities. Then the other thing that is coming out clearly, and which is really true from a lot of studies that have looked at this issue of our grower scheme, is that what Amathion is looking at crops or commodities that are not really high value crops. And if they would want to see a bit more participation, maybe a bit more interest from the farmers, maybe targeting high value crops where they assure the markets to the farmers, would be one way to also see more improvement when it comes to issues of incomes. The last point I would like to make is that at the end of the day, we would like to, I think for us to really see the impacts, we may need a little bit more time, because again, we were looking at a window of 4 to 5 years, and for Chivombo, for instance, they had only been there for like a year at the time of going in to collect data. So to be able to really say something that really demonstrates that there's been a huge impact, it requires a bit more time to really see these things. And at the end of the day, we are actually thinking of that to go again and do another wave of data collection, because this data that we collected was from 2018. So our plan is to actually go back again next year and see whether there's been any change over time. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thanks a lot, Chewe. A very interesting discussion there on large-scale investments, especially that you look at a particular case in the agriculture sector. And I wonder why the Amathion case would be considered one of the most successful projects, especially given some of the factors that you've highlighted today. Yes, there has been quite a high uptake amongst farmers in training, but when you look at income between the participants and the non-participants in the project, we don't see a difference at all. So why would we consider Amathion such a success? And if you would, best practice within large-scale land acquisition discussions. And is there a peculiarity within the Amathion case that we can attribute some of the successes that you talked about to? Is there something within that project that other investors could learn from? And I think we need information and knowledge in these projects to ensure that implementation and experiences from some of the best practices, in this case, the Amathion, in some aspects can be adequately recorded and shared. And obviously a lot more research and analysis on what's going on the ground, and are the farmers actually benefiting from some of these projects. Thank you so much. We'll explore these questions a bit more later in the Q&A session, but I just want to move to our next presenter. So our next presentation is from Nsama Musonda-Cairns, who is an environmental conservationist and community activist. She works in Wampula province, and over the last 10 years, she has been advocating for local people's rights to access and utilize fundamental natural resources, while at the same time promoting conservation. Nsama is currently studying social development at Cavendish University. And today, her presentation analyzes or looks at the impact of the extractive industries on customary land in Zambia. So she's focusing on land administration and development planning. Nsama, please go ahead. Hello, Nsama, if you could just unmute yourself, I think you should be able to hear you. Okay, we'll try and reconnect with Nsama. She does not seem to be able to unmute herself or Yeah, we can't hear her. But before we even move on to the next presentation, I think I just want to go back to Chewe and Andrew because their conversation really speak to each other. And some of the inefficiencies that Andrew highlighted, I would like for Chewe to just comment on. He talked about corruption, underfunding in the agriculture sector, cadarism. He highlighted that there is no land market in Zambia either. So these might be some of the factors that are causing problems within large-scale land acquisition deals, and also a very fragmented coordination system amongst the different actors and the acquisition process in terms of land. Cho, would you just like to respond to some of these points that Andrew raised?
All right, no, thank you so much. I mean, I'll give you a very good example. So one of the things, and this maybe mainly, and it's not something I talked about, but it came from the qualitative component of our study, where we were even talking about, when talking to the managers of Amathion, because we also interviewed them and had a chat with them. And this issue relates to the aspect of them getting title deeds, because they, as you know, they've got 40,000 hectares, some of which they do not have title reach because they're in the process of acquiring title, because and therefore they have really gone through a huge battle. You know, they feel like sometimes the process is quite lengthy, and sometimes they've actually complained about the fact that they feel like they are being coerced to actually think about maybe bribing somebody at the with the relevant authorities to be able to get the title. So these are some of the challenges that on the part of Amathion, they have actually mentioned in the discussions that we had with them. But on the side of the farmers themselves, I mean, in talking to the farmers seem to be generally happy with the way Amathion has been working with them, except of course in some cases where some farmers feel like they have not really benefited from the whole scheme because the scheme was really not well targeted in terms of the outdoor scheme. But generally, they didn't speak so much ill of Amathion. But again, at the end of the day, we were not really focusing so much on that during the study that we did. But in terms of what Andrew spoke, I think I really definitely agree with most of the points he raised. The issue of political interference, cadarism, is definitely a big issue and something that is of huge concern.
All right, thanks a lot, Chewe. Now, I'll just ask Andrew one question very quickly. You talked about the lack of a land market in Zambia, and this might be contributing some of the inefficiencies in large-scale land acquisitions. Do you think that there's a possibility of developing a coordinated and efficient land market, especially looking at the duality of tenure in the country?
This is a very important question. Thank you very much for asking. At the same time, it is important, but also difficult to answer. First of all, I think it is difficult on two fronts. The first one is when you want to do a land market that includes customary land, you're actually getting customary land into the formal sector. And if you do that, then you're actually stifling what actually customary land stands for or what it's meant to be. Second, the only way I think, or at least one of the ways we could do land marketing in the country is by having an analysis of how much land we have in the country so that we know which land is which and where it is, so that we put a value on every piece of land in the country. And this is going to be extremely expensive. And I'm not sure if it's one of the priorities of the government at the moment. So we need definitely a lot of stakeholder partnerships with development institutions. And if we can mobilize enough resources to be able to do that, that's going to be great. And I do know, as far as I'm concerned, that up to this point, we do not have any comprehensive land mapping in the country. So before we can even talk about putting an economic value on every acre of land in the country, we should definitely, first of all, start with having this comprehensive mapping of the land in the country. So I think it is very difficult at two fronts. One, the philosophy that underpins state land is different from the philosophy that underpins customary land. And secondly, pulling customer land into a formal economy is right now, as we know, the coexistence of state land and customer land is pretty much like a marriage of convenience between the state and traditional authorities. It's not always a very smooth coexistence, as we know. So this is likely to be very difficult. I highlighted this point just to show that we have a challenge that we need to be surmounted, and we need to think through so as to be able to kind of give the best possibilities to both state land and customer land, so that people who own the right to use this piece of land have the best deals for the socio-economic prosperity of their households and the country as a whole.
All right, thanks a lot, Andrew. We'll try and reconnect with Nsama and move on with the discussion. But for now, we'll move on to our third presenter, who is Lungisani Zulu. He is the Vice President of the Law Association of Zambia and serves as a part-time judge on the Lands Tribunal. He is a legal practitioner and has over 11 years experience. He holds a Master of Laws degree from Cornell University in New York and a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of Zambia. He has a very interesting presentation today. He looks at the adjudication of land disputes in Zambia. He wonders if the more the merrier or too many cooks spoiling the broth. So Lungisani, please go ahead with your presentation. Lungisani, if you could just turn on your video and unmute your mic and just proceed with your presentation. Okay, while we wait for Lungisani to sort that out and for Nsama to join us again, I go back to Chewe. 1.2 million hectares of land under large-scale land acquisition deals. Do we have a monitoring mechanism in Zambia that is recording all of this? You talk about the land matrix, that's where your data is collected from, but is there, if you will, an in-house mechanism or tool that we're using to ensure that we collect data on how much land is being acquired at such a large scale, especially in customary areas?
Thank you very much. I think that question actually was indirectly answered by Andrew when he talked about going to ZDA and trying to get some of this information that would help inform what is happening on the ground. And, you know, for me to start going to land matrix, that just tells you one thing, that probably this information or this monitoring mechanism is missing in Zambia. If it is there, it's really disjointed in most cases. So to answer your question, really, there could be something put in place, but nothing that we can really rely on with confidence that this would give us the data that we need in terms of how much of land, where, and how many of these probably have title deeds already given to them. All that information that you might need is not something that you can easily obtain from the locally available monitors, if you will. So unless I've been missing something, because it's something I've also been looking at, trying to really get more detailed information, and this is something that is missing. And if you go to the Ministry of Lands, you still face the challenge of getting such kind of information because they do not easily give that kind of information to anybody asking for it.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, definitely important data to have, and we look forward to having such a database that will sort of follow through with the kinds of acquisitions that that are happening within the land sector, especially in customary areas, as many people seem to argue that there is very little documentation going on there. Of course, a point of contention for a lot of people. Now, Andrew, there's this policy of promoting large-scale land acquisition. And it's happening. So many records on how much land is being given away. So 100 years, 500 years from now, how do the 18 million Zambians benefit from these large-scale land acquisitions? How do we ensure that the projects that are being undertaken at such a large scale do, at the end of the day, benefit the 18 million Zambians?
Thank you, Chiro. I think that's $1 million question. If you go to Nansanga farm block in central part of the country, you realize that the land which was meant to be an agricultural land, part of it in the southern part of the farm block has been turned into a mining area. So currently there are 2 mining companies that are doing open pit mining. And this is part of the Nansanga farm block area. And some communities, some people who had who got land with title deeds, actually what they are doing is selling land to the mining companies to be able to expand their mining activities on those parcels of land. What does this mean exactly? So communities, some people got land and do not have the means to develop the land. What they do is to sell the land. So actually we are creating a class of landless people already, because we have taken the existence of a non-functional farm block in an area like Nansanga has created a land market in a rural area where people are not used to seeing a lot of money. So if you give somebody 100,000 kwacha, that's a lot of money to be able to give you, let's say 10 or 15 hectares of land. That's not a problem at all. And secondly, these large-scale land acquisitions like Amathion and like others, these are highly sophisticated agricultural operations. And if you have to have this kind of operation in an area where people have never been to school, or let's say to high schools or colleges, they don't know how to read, they cannot drive cars. Eventually what they become is they become laborers, really laborers, like casual workers. And when you talk about the quality of jobs in these operations, they are quite bad. So to what extent do local communities benefit? It's very hard actually to, qualitatively speaking, it's not as important economically as we are meant to believe. So I think there is always overselling the potential benefits and underplaying the potential negative impacts that these operations have on the local communities. Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. I think we can continue having these conversations for much longer, but I want to move on to Lungisani. Hopefully he can join us now, and he's looking at the adjudication of land disputes in Zambia. Lungisani, are you there?
Yes, I am. Chilombo, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and I have quite already been encouraged by the interesting presentations that have preceded mine. My topic is on the adjudication of land disputes in Zambia. The more the merrier, or too many cooks spoiling the broth. By we, I mean myself and Deborah Walia. I have not checked whether she's managed to log on to be on this forum, but what we are trying to look at is the nature of land adjudication in Zambia. And I will rely on is it Alex to just scroll for me the slides as I go through. But essentially, we want to check and we interrogate whether the various forum or fora that have been established do help in effective and efficient adjudication of land disputes in Zambia. In terms of the outline, I will generally introduce the topic. I'll talk about what these fora for land adjudication are in Zambia, what are the challenges and opportunities that are presented by this multiplicity of fora for land education. what are some of the policy considerations that could be looked at, and then proceed to conclude. By way of introduction, it is important to appreciate that Zambia has a dual land tenure system, which is the majority of the land in Zambia is under customary tenure, and the remaining portion is occupied by the statutory tenure. Now, as between the two different tenures, they are indeed inter-tenure disputes that can be noted in terms of when one is converting from one to the other, boundary issues and dispute, as well as processes that must be followed, will obviously happen. But equally, intra-tenure disputes are also a commonplace. So it then becomes important to check and interrogate whether there is an effective and efficient land dispute mechanism in place, because it is well appreciated that since land anchors all economic development, obviously if there's a lag in that area, that also have an effect on how the country develops. From the supreme law of the land, the Constitution of Zambia, it is an aspiration that it's a principle that effective and efficient land dispute resolution must be attained. So it's a national goal which is embedded in the Constitution of Zambia. And in this presentation, we are really trying to check whether the national aspirations as contained in the Constitution of Zambia are attained or go a long way by the various fora that have been set up to deal with land disputes between the tenures as well as intra-tenures. And as I mentioned before, we also make some policy recommendations on the matter. So what are the different fora that are established to deal with land disputes in Zambia? So essentially, when we say too many, indeed they do look too many, because the starting point, especially for customary land, is traditional courts. These are courts that are set up by the chiefs who hold this land on behalf of the subjects. So under customary tenure, traditional courts play a critical role in resolving disputes that arise or may arise between individuals touching on customary tenure. So courts do not have a formal structure per se, and do not have a formal support per se, but they are recognized to be a dispute resolution mechanism for any traditional issue, any traditional matter, any customary law issue can be dealt with by the traditional courts. And these are the courts where some of the disputes that touch on the land are actually taken. Aside from traditional courts, local courts. The local courts are established by a statute, the Local Courts Act, which is they are established by statute, which is an act of parliament, and they have the mandate to deal with disputes on customary law. Now, in dealing with disputes on customary law, some of the disputes that actually find themselves before these courts are disputes touching on customary law. So these local courts do play a critical role in the resolution of land disputes insofar as customary tenure is concerned, but not statutory tenure. Appeals from local courts go to magistrate courts. These are courts that are established yet again by the Subordinate Court Act, which is a creature or a statute by Parliament, through appellate jurisdiction on matters that began from local courts. The magistrate courts do have jurisdiction to resolve customary law matters. Additionally, they do also have power to deal with statutory tenure disputes, but the jurisdiction is conditional on the consent of the parties before the court. So if the parties do agree that the matter be commenced and dealt with by the magistrate court, the court will be able to proceed to deal with that dispute. So they play both an appellate jurisdiction insofar as customary law and customary tenure disputes are concerned for matters that emanated from the local courts, as well as dealing with jurisdiction on statutory tenure where there's consent. Aside from the magistrate courts are the lands tribunal, where I actually sit as a part-time judge. This is a court which is a specialized tribunal to deal specifically with all land-related disputes. It is a part-time based court. The judges sit in Lusaka and have the jurisdiction to deal with any land, whether it's customary law and statutory law, land law issue. So these also play critical role in determination of disputes. Aside from the lands tribunal is the High Court. The High Court has unlimited jurisdiction to do with all matters, and land matters also do find themselves in the High Court. And these can either be a statutory tenure or customary tenure. Appeals from the High Court go to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal deals with, has appellate jurisdiction over land law, land tenure disputes. From the Court of Appeal, appeals can do lie to the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court does have appellate jurisdiction insofar as land disputes are concerned. It should also be appreciated that aside from the Supreme Court, we also have the Constitutional Court. Now, insofar as a dispute may touch on constitutional interpretations, the Constitutional Court can be called in to deal with a dispute in the land, between either customary law or statutory law. So we can conclude that there are quite a number of fora where a dispute can be taken in Zambia. And this is, I think, the basis of our interrogation, whether all these numerous fora are helping in ensuring that we are aligned to the constitutional aspiration for efficient and effective land dispute resolution in Zambia. Aside from this forum, we are then trying to check what are the challenges and opportunities that are presented by the numerous or multiplicity of this forum. So generally, we observe that even though they do appear to be too many, their impact on effective and efficient inter and intra-land disputes is minimal. Firstly, traditional courts, which obviously are the closest to the customary land disputes, even though they do play a critical role, they do not have a say, obviously, on any statutory tenure, and do not receive any formal government support. So the traditional courts do not have formal government support in so far as land adjudication is concerned. So maybe that's a resource which is lying idle, and this can be used if it's formalized and supported to help in efficient and effective adjudication of land. Secondly, local courts, though they form the formal government structures in administering customary law, including land disputes, that there does not appear to be any government or formal government policy or deliberate policy to guide local courts in how they should deal with customary land disputes. So land disputes, therefore, are treated like any other customary issue, which may not go a long way in helping in the efficiency and effectiveness of land dispute resolution. Thirdly, magistrate courts also, notwithstanding that the formal courts established by statute, equally don't have a formal system to prioritize or to distinguish land adjudication disputes that are taken to the subordinate court. So there is little impact, therefore, insofar as the magistrate court and the local courts are concerned in helping in the effective and efficient adjudication of land disputes because of lack of a deliberate policy to prioritize or to distinguish land disputes from all different types of land disputes. So dispute resolution for many other competing matters obviously means that the little resources available must be spread together with adjudication of land dispute, which obviously has an impact on the efficiency and effectiveness. Fourthly is the Lands Tribunal. We believe that the Lands Tribunal is a strategic fora for land dispute resolution. However, there are quite structural inhibitions that make it not very effective. And one of the challenges is that this is not a full-time court. It's made up of part-time judges. So obviously they have to compete with many other different requirements. As a result, its role and impact on land adjudication in Zambia is quite limited. Further, it is based mostly in Lusaka, the capital city. Yet the disputes, insofar as the customary land is concerned, happen in all the 10 provinces. So the fact that there's no presence of the land tribunal in the various areas. I mean, personally, I've seen litigants coming as far as Southern Province for land which is in a chief. A dispute relates to a land in a chief in Southern Province. You can appreciate the challenges that the litigants have to just fund the cost of traveling. Some of the litigants even beg the court to allow them not to attend. So that speaks to the realities of the challenges of lack of decentralization of this strategic court. So we think that that challenge, in as much as the Lands Tribunal is strategically positioned, it's a good opportunity, but there are quite a number of challenges that could and do actually impact on its efficiency.
All right, Sunny, you have 5 minutes to wrap up.
Thank you, Alex. So in wrapping up, the High Court 2 is a strategic institution which we believe could and does help in pushing along the national agenda for effective and efficient land dispute resolution. However, the High Court has specialized division for family matters, specialized division for commercial matters, specialized division for matrimonial matters. But there's no specialized division for land disputes, despite land dispute adjudication being named as a specific goal in the supreme law of the land. So there is a mismatch there, because you would expect that the mere fact that it has this important status, then there could be a specialized portion or division of the court to deal with that. So the mere fact that this is not in place has limited the impact of the High Court. The superior courts, being the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, and the Constitutional Court, obviously being appellate court, can only do so much, meaning they rely on matters starting from the lower courts. But the mere fact that their challenges lower also limits the impact of the superior courts in land adjudication in Zambia. So in a nutshell, it is our view that much more needs to be done. There are quite a number of policy considerations that the country can actually look at to enhance the effective and efficient adjudication of land disputes in Zambia, including either transforming the Plans Tribunal into a full-time court or a division of the High Court specialized in land matters. Further, there should be some form of government support to traditional courts, which are located in various districts and places in Zambia. So a specialized some form of training in how to resolve some of these disputes could go a long way in enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of land disputes in Zambia. Further, in line with the draft land policy, we think deliberate mechanisms to infuse alternative dispute resolution at different types of forums that we have discussed could be one way of moving the agenda forward. So those are some of the policy considerations that we are proposing to enhance land adjudication in Zambia. Yes, there are so many cooks in the area. We think they are not spoiling it, but they are not quite doing the best because of lack of certain structural interventions that could make them more effective. Thank you so much. So that essentially is what I wanted to discuss. Thank you so much, Alex, and the rest.
Thanks a lot, Lungisani.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
that was Chilombo actually. I thought it was Alex. Sorry, my bad.
That's all right. That's all right. Yes, I can see you're stuck in traffic somewhere or driving somewhere, but please stay on because we have quite a number of questions around land adjudication and the points that you raised. But I just want to quickly move to Nsama, who is presenting on the extractive industries. I hope now she's able to join us and we can hear her. Nsama, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just trying to get my video.
All right. Okay, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much and good afternoon to everyone. I won't be long. My presentation is quite short and it touches on what the previous presenters have said. Okay, so I'm going to present on the impact of extractive industries on customary land in Zambia. And this is a case of land administration and development planning. Okay, can go to the next slide. Okay, so as I'm waiting for the next slide, okay, thank you. As we heard from the first presentation, the statistics that we have on land are not so clear. When Zambia got independence, we had about 95% of customary land. And now we heard from the earlier presentation that now we're talking about 54%, which is more like we have already lost about 41% of customary land. And for me, I'm looking at what is currently happening on the ground, and I'm taking examples from Luapula, where customary land is being lost at a fast rate due to inadequate management plans. As we heard even yesterday from the chief who made a presentation that traditional leaders also do play a big role in customary land administration, but the difference with state land and customary land is that it is not documented. And in as much as they are managing this land, they are not taking into consideration the social, economic, and environmental impacts when they assign the land. So as you can see in the picture, this is just one of the areas of what is happening. A lot of institutions now are promoting women involvement in mining. I must mention that in 2018, we did a research on women's access to development minerals and mining rights in Mansa, which was supported by United Nations Development Program. And we found that a lot of women are actually going into mining, but as they enter the mining sector, they're going there without any knowledge of mining. And so they are just doing it to see if they can gain income. And what we are losing now is areas that would otherwise be used for agriculture. Next slide. Okay, waiting for the next slide. Okay, so because there are so many people who are interested in customary land, and when it comes to large-scale land acquisition, there are also a lot of conflicts that are arising because we've got the investors, we've got government that is also trying to gain revenue out of the land, we've got traditionals that are trying to get royalties, and we've also got the local people who are also trying to benefit from the natural resources that are found within their communities. But the challenge that we have is we have unplanned settlements, and also we've got an emerging issue of artisanal and small-scale mining. This is not just happening in Wapula, but it is also happening throughout the country where a lot of people have gone into mining, but some of these activities are being done just within the communities. And for us as Care for Nature Zambia, we have a challenge because on one side, we're trying to advocate for people's rights to access these natural resources, the minerals, because they have the right. But at the same time, we're also worried as they are accessing these natural resources, are they taking into consideration the other effects that may be coming? As you can see, this where they're mining manganese, it's just not even 2 meters from the house. So even the large pits are just like 100 meters away from the settlements where people are living. This means that the land which could have been used for agriculture or for play areas for children is now being taken away. Next slide. Okay, so in addition to, apart from extractive industries, we heard from the people that presented yesterday that indeed we do have forests, we have game management areas, and we also have national parks, including the mines that I'm talking about, which fall within the customary areas. But how much control do the traditional leaders and the people on the ground have to the revenue which is coming from the forests, from the game management areas and national parks? You'll find that when these protected areas, when people are told that these areas are protected, I'll give an example of wildlife. The people that live near the game management areas or national parks are not able to access wildlife which is in there. Even though there are no butcheries within the area, they cannot go into the protected areas. And if they enter, they are arrested as poachers. The same happens in the forest reserves. So even with the coming of the mining, if you look at mining, it takes up a lot of space. We're talking about a lot of hectares. When people get these large-scale land for mining, they convert it to state land. And when it is fenced off, the people lose a livelihood because they can no longer get firewood, they can no longer get the caterpillars, the mushrooms, and even sometimes they have no access to water sources. The extractive industry is also threatening agriculture. For a long time in Zambia, even to date, we have depended on agriculture as our main source of food and also income. So as more and more people are entering into mining, they are taking away the land, the arable land, which was used for agriculture. And when these minerals are being explored or exploited, you'll find that the chiefs are supposed to be consulted. But in some cases, the chiefs, when they are consulted, they do not report back to their subjects. And this is where the challenge is, because it's either the state will manage that land where the mining is taking place, or they'll get the revenue and it doesn't trickle back to the local people, or the traditional leaders will be consulted, they'll consent, and they'll get some royalties. In some areas we've seen where traditional leaders have houses have been built for them, they've got cars, they've got farms, but those royalties are not trickling down to the people. So when you look at customary land and state land, you begin to wonder, because when we look at state land, we say it is vested in the president who holds it on behalf of the Zambian people. But this revenue coming from the land is not trickling back to the Zambian people. The same is with our traditional leaders. They are holding this land on behalf of their subjects. But when they get the royalties, it is not going back to the local people. Next slide. So the other challenge is out of desperation, because people depend on natural resources to survive, and they don't get much out of that because they lack the knowledge. They don't even know the value of the land. There's no land market, or there's no mechanism to tell people how much the land is worth. So when somebody comes and they offer them whatever amount which they don't have, they will sell the land. And this is what is so worrisome, because at the moment, a lot of local people have sold their land. And when they sell the land, like I mentioned earlier on, once it is fenced off, they lose other livelihoods. Activities, like most of the people, when we look at the rural areas, most of the areas are not electrified, and they depend on wood and charcoal for energy and also for cooking. So when they sell out the land, which includes the community forest, they lose a source of livelihood, which also relates to energy and also in terms of water. And also, when you look at land, we're saying land is wealth. It is something that is passed on from generation to generation, which children inherit. So most of these local people, they're selling off their land, meaning their children will have no inheritance. And once this land has been sold off, it is converted to state land, meaning that within maybe 10 years from now, if we are remaining with 54% of customary land, we might just have 25%, which means that the local people will not be able to afford, in case people, they build houses and they start putting them on rent, the people will not be able to afford. The next one. Okay. So for us, the policy issue here is how do people benefit from natural resources when they lack the knowledge? How do they benefit when the policies do not get to the grassroots? Usually you'll find that policies are usually centralized when it comes to making. The local people are not consulted. The policies are usually made in Lusaka. For me personally, I've attended a lot of meetings where policies are being introduced, but when I go back, Luapula's got about 1 million people. How do I inform all the 1 million people? So it becomes a challenge. And even if people come for a consultation meeting within Luapula, you'll find that they'll invite about 25 civil society organizations coming from 12 different districts. So how do these people reach out to the local people? So for me, I feel if we are going to help our people to preserve land, if we are going to help even the traditional leaders to see meaningful benefit out of customary land, we need to have a comprehensive land policy. As we know, up to now, it is still in draft because there were issues of where do traditional leaders fall within the land policy. But in as much as they are recognized, they also need to be recognized when it comes to revenue sharing, because we don't know how much traditional leaders get from forests, from wildlife, and from other land uses that are within customary area, which belong to the state. And also, when laws are made, Zambia right now is implementing proper policies, but then the local people are not involved, even when it comes to issues of environment, like you can see in the picture here. This site in Mansa is not even 5 meters from the households or settlement. So meaning we are losing biodiversity, We are also losing play areas for children. This is not safe. And also the people are just losing land because no one will give people money to bury these pits. People can give you money to conduct mining, but they won't give you money to reverse the environmental damage being caused. So in conclusion, for me, I feel the local people are a source of human capital, but we cannot have this human capital if education is ending on people who are educated already. We need to find a way that we get the local people involved in decision making. We also help them to understand the value. I think even the issue of Mukula is one example. The people of Northern Province had lived with those trees for a long time because they didn't know their value. Until we heard about the Mukula trade, people did not know the value. So this is the same with land. If you look at the land in future, are the people going to be able to afford this land which they're giving out in large parcels? So we need a way to help our people understand the value of land, and if they have to sell the land, is there anyone to do evaluations? Because that is one thing which is happening. There are no evaluations, so you just look at your piece of land, if it's 50 by 50, and you sell it off like that. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot, Nsama. Very, very interesting presentation there. I wonder, how do we make the mines accountable to sustainable investment practices? But also, in addition to the impact on communities, I think it's important to look at the environmental impacts of these investments as well. We need to critically consider that. And I think another thing that we need to look at is what happens once these projects have run their lifespan. What happens at the end of the project? What happens to the community? What happens to the sustenance of the livelihood of the community? Say 10, 20 years, however long those projects will run in those particular communities. Is there a transfer of skills, for example, to the locals to make them productive long after the project has come to the end? I think these are some of the key questions that we need to reflect on. I'll come back to you, Nsama, but now I just want to go to Lungisani. I hope he's still with us. Lungisani? Lungisani, are you still there? Okay.
Looks like he's logged off.
Okay, all right. Maybe then, Nsama, while you're still here, can you, you've talked about, or you've highlighted a few policy considerations, especially when it comes to the implementation of these projects. One of the key things that you highlighted was the role of traditional leaders in these projects, in the negotiation of these projects. How do we hold traditional leaders accountable? Is there a mechanism, whether traditionally, customarily, or even legally, that we can use or communities can use to ensure that local leadership, traditional leadership, is held accountable for the decisions that they make on land that belongs to the communities?
Okay, thank you very much, Chilombo. So for me, I feel when policies are made, because if you look at the policy cycle, it's supposed to start from the bottom, from the ground. So the people should have a say into it. And even the traditional leaders, when these policies, they need to understand that they are holding this land on behalf of the people, their subjects, and not on their behalf. The challenge that we have is sometimes, traditional leaders, they've also got this advantage that they have some supernatural powers of which people are scared of. So they would just tell their subjects that you can't talk about this land, it's my land. And I think this is what we need to break. The traditional leaders need to know that they are not holding this land on their behalf. So I think it starts with sensitizing the chiefs that this land which they're holding, just like government, governments come, governments go, and the land remains. They should also know that they're just there as the custodians and also administrators of the land which belongs to the people. I remember in 2016, when we were doing the constitution review, a lot of people in the rural areas said they don't want the chiefs to manage the land. And it's because of the experiences that they have had in the sorry about that, the chiefs in one way or the other, if they are managing the land well, they do have the capacity to help the people benefit from it, because those people, when they get the land, they're looking at the inheritance, where they're coming from, their parents have lived in that area, and they're not paying land rates. They're also not paying for the other livelihood sources which are there. They're not paying for the wood. And if it is converted to state, they would have to start paying the land rates. And looking at the poverty levels, that is also something that we are worried about. So for me, I feel the drive needs to come from traditional leaders. They need to understand their role in land administration. Thank you, Chilombo.
All right, thanks, Nsama. I want to, okay, we have 20 minutes left in this discussion. So just a reminder that please, if you have a question, let us know who that question is addressed to and put it in the Q&A box. Lungisani is back with us. If you could just confirm that he's back. Yes.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm
back. You're back in the office. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Lungisani, I have a question around the multiplicity of the forums that you talked about for land adjudication. I wonder, is that the problem, or is the problem the incapacity of the Lands Tribunal as it is structured now to deal with the overwhelming number and also the nature of cases? Perhaps unpacking these constraints, like you did, will help us to move forward. But I wonder, where does the problem actually lie? Is it the structure of the Lands Tribunal, or the multiplicity of cases and the fragmentation of actors in the adjudication process?
Thank you so much, Chilombo. That's a very interesting question, and indeed it helps to zero in what exactly could be the challenge. I think, first of all, the Lands Tribunal is very critical. It's a critical institution, but the fact that it is obviously structured as a part-time tribunal, part-time fora, and also coupled with the fact that it is only found in Lusaka, makes it inevitable that there must be many other fora to deal with land disputes. So yes, challenges, different types of disputes could come before the Lands Tribunal, but the Lands Tribunal currently can not effectively and efficiently deal with the amount of cases that it will be that if there were no other fora. So I think that the best way to proceed is to strengthen and support the other fora as you look at how to structurally adjust the current current standing of the Lands Tribunal. So ordinarily, you would have expected that the Lands Tribunal, at the bare minimum, perhaps is found in the provincial centers across Zambia. So that would be 10 places. But even then, that would not be enough, because you recall that it is dealing with both customary disputes as well as statutory tenure disputes, as well as inter disputes between these tenures. So you would not imagine how much cases it would deal with ordinarily if it were properly structured. But the fact that it has these, I think, challenges makes it inevitable that the courts, the traditional courts have to play their role. The local courts must continue to play their role, and the other fora that we discussed, until such a time that we can decentralize the Lands Tribunal as the primary fora for land dispute resolution. We cannot ignore all the other types of fora and the critical role they are doing to help in moving forward the discourse on efficiency and effectiveness of land dispute resolution. So I think it's not a problem that there are other tribunals or other fora for land dispute resolution currently. The problem would have been worse if it was only the lands tribunal, because currently it cannot and it is not structured to deal with all manner of disputes in these two types of fora. Thank you, Chilombo.
All right, thanks, Lungisani. I want to turn now to Chewe. Following Lungisani's presentation of land disputes, I want to go back to your presentation on the Amathion case. You talked about farmers in Mumbwa and Chibombo voluntarily selling their land. They're selling produce to Amathion as well, painting it as a success in some way. I wonder if there were any issues of land grabs within the Amathion case that were highlighted, and were there dispute issues, where were they taken? If they were, what was the resolution process there?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chilombo. Again, I would like to correctly state that in terms of the farmers who are selling land to Amathion, it's not the smallholder farmers who are on customary land, but it was actually the farmers who were in the big concession where this land was sitting on. Either there was title, or at least they were in the process of getting title themselves. So this was state land. But like I mentioned, Amathion, I think, managed to negotiate with both the local council in Mumbwa as well as Chief Kaindo, I think, to get part of the other land that was in the customary land area. But in terms of the details of how much land they got from there, I would really be giving you wrong information. I don't want to be quoted on that one because that's not really what was our interest in terms of our study. We were more interested on the outgrower scheme, which was focusing on improving the livelihoods of farmers that were in the areas where Amathion was working. But in terms of disputes, there were a few cases that we heard of. Again, this was more anecdotes than actual things that we went to investigate, because again, like I said, that was outside the perimeter of the work that we're doing. So, but we heard of cases of where some farmers, because what happened was those who were in the periphery of Amathion, they were asked, because these people were sort of encroaching on the land of the people in the big concession. So they were basically asked to move because that wasn't their land, but Amathion was willing to compensate them. But some of them were actually cheating and saying, no, actually, I'm the one who was staying in this area. So basically, they were expecting more payment from Amathion, and those where some of the contention arose in that context. But otherwise, in terms of farmers fighting with Amathion, that Amathion has actually stolen land from them, it's something, again, we didn't investigate, and it was outside our purview as researchers in terms of the work that we were doing.
Okay, thank you. And just following on that, I want for you to start with the concluding remarks. Based on all of this research that you've undertaken, and you do say that you'll be going back to collect more data, do a bit more analysis, where do you think Zambia currently stands in terms of large-scale land acquisitions? Is there going to be, or do you see improvement in terms of the management of large-scale land deals? And also, just for information purposes, what is the maximum land size that one can acquire for agriculture purposes?
Okay, yeah. So in terms of do we anticipate to see improvements in the future? From what I think, there's been a lot of discussion and in this space where the civil society, different stakeholders like the Zambia Land Alliance, have been pretty proactive in trying to ensure that this does not disadvantage the local communities. And I'm kind of optimistic, but at the same time, cautiously optimistic, because you never really know what the future holds. I think what's important is to ensure that even as we look at the land policy, which has taken long to be actually finally put in place, but with the fact that there's still a lot of contention when it comes to that, it means that people are not so comfortable with the status quo. So it's important that we really address this issue, because, you know, at the end of the day, you and I may not be here 50, 100 years from now, but what will happen to communities that will be there at that time? So it's important that we don't just think about ourselves, but think about the future of generations that are coming ahead of us. So it's really, really important that we do that. with respect to the question that you asked about how much land is, and I think somebody asked that question in the Q&A about that as well. I mean, from what I've heard and what I know is that when it comes to customary land, you cannot obtain more than 250 hectares as a single entity. But I know that on land that is designated, for example, if the government deliberately says we're going to make this a farm block area and we want to have an entity that is going to run this particular farm block area to have 10,000 hectares, that can be done if the government decrees that they're going to do that. So I think it depends on the setup. If it's for customary land, I don't think you can get more than 250 hectares. But for things like farm block development, you can get more than that because that's what the government wants to see in terms of large-scale land acquisition. So it really depends on the case that you have. Yeah.
Okay.
Did I miss anything else? Did I miss anything else?
Okay, no, that's all right. Thanks a lot, Chewe. Thank you for those concluding remarks. I now want to go to Andrew for his final remarks. And as he reflects on the discussion today, I'd like him to also talk about the politics that he highlighted in his presentation, the cadarism. How do we overcome this? Or is there a way of overcoming this in the implementation of policies, not just in terms of large-scale land acquisitions, but within the wider land sector? Is there a way that cadarism and party politics that seems to play such a critical role in how these matters are handled, is there a way of overcoming those?
Thank you very much, Chilombo. To be honest, these are very pertinent questions, but also very difficult to resolve because essentially they are systemic. Those of you who are interested in reading government documents, one of the important documents that we have right now is the 7th Development Plan of 2017. If you check on page 29, the government itself acknowledges the problem of corruption in the country. This is the government itself. And so it's quite a big problem that, despite the government's acknowledgement of its own problems, we don't see much progress in terms of remedying the corruption issue, not just in the land sector, but also in other sectors. Now, land has a very particular difficulty in the sense that, the government cannot institutionally go to a traditional leader and say, stop corruption or stop what they perceive to be corruption, because that is not their area of influence. Likewise, the chief would never tell the government if they perceive corruption on state land to say, government, you have to stop that. So this is why at some point I did mention that, the coexistence of customary land and state land and the politics that plays out between state agencies and traditional authorities is pretty much a marriage of convenience. And I think this partly contributes to why it has taken way too long to have the land policy in the country. And how do we stamp out cadarism from the system in Zambia? That also is $1 million question. I think we are living in a country where politics weighs a lot more than the technical sides of how we govern our natural resources. So if we can limit the level of influence of politics in our governance structures, that could help. But is that really possible? Are we at that stage where we could tell the politicians who are the most influential and most important people in our country to say, guys, step aside so that the technical people can operate? I'm not able to tell that. But until if we don't do that, it will be very difficult to stamp out. Because as I mentioned, we know, and the government knows, that cadarism exists. People are giving land to other people without the knowledge of government institutions, but it's happening and everybody knows. And I don't think we're doing much to be able to put a stop to that. The problem is this: land is, in economic terms, a factor of production everywhere in the world. And it's particularly important for an agrarian society like Zambia. But over time, I think land in Zambia has also become a political tool. So if it's a political tool, nobody wants to let go of a political tool unless they don't want to be in power. So it becomes very, very critical. This is just a reflection. And then the second point is, I think, if we can strengthen the institutions so that this institutional fragmentation that we see, taking an example of Nasanga Farm Block, where there is mining happening, this means the Ministry of Mines gave the licensing, the explorer license to explore and to actually start actual mining in the farm block, which was meant for agricultural production, without the official knowledge of the Ministry of Agriculture or the Ministry of Lands. How to reconcile these two things? It's baffling, if you will, that within the same system, one ministry is doing something with the same resource that the other ministry doesn't know. So if we can improve on the institutions, I think to support close collaboration, that this could help a little bit more. This would be like my concluding remarks. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Andrew. Now just quickly move to Nsama, just for closing reflections. How do we ensure that local communities benefit from investments in the extractive industries? How do we hold traditional leaders accountable? You've highlighted that already, but is there hope for ensuring that future generations are not being denied of their right to land based on these large investments, the acquisition of land, and the extraction of mineral resources and other natural resources in communities around Zambia?
Okay, thank you very much, Lombo. Hope is there because just last month, we did the Luapula mining in Saka, and we had a chance to speak to 3 chiefs. And one of them was Chief Chisunka, who through the advocacy way has even got a strategic plan. And he is aware that if he does not preserve that land for the people have nowhere to go. And it was actually quite encouraging the way he explained that. I've realized that when we give out land and these people convert the land, they are cutting off our people from accessing most of the things that they were accessing before. So if most of the traditional leaders can also take a leaf from what Chief Chisunka has done, actually for him, he has even got lawyers. Before he signs any documents, he refers them to his lawyers and the lawyers' advice. So for me, I feel we've got a lot of good policies, because if we look at the issue of mining, we've got the environmental impact assessments, environmental and social impact assessments, which include the local people. It starts with public hearing. If only we could follow what is written in our policies, I think we can turn around the way our land is being managed. If you look at, I think Andrew had mentioned something about Zambia Development Agency. They've got a big role to play to make sure that the people that are going to the communities are investors that have passed through their office, they've gone through assessment, and when they go there, they're going to follow what is in the Mines and Minerals Development Act, because it talks about community development, it talks about knowledge transfer. And it was very sad last time when we spoke to Chief Mwewa. He said that because of what is happening in his chief domain, Chifunawuli, there in Luapula, the roads are in such a bad state that the people could not access the farming inputs. They had to drop them off for them at a very, very far place. And cycling in roads which are dilapidated is quite difficult for the people. So it actually also affected their farming and the youths that they got. So for me, I feel if we can just follow. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, Nsama. Yes, very important. Finally, Nungisani, some closing reflections on land dispute resolution in under 30 seconds, if you can. Is there a way that we can integrate indigenous land dispute processes into the legal framework?
Yes, there is. And I think it begins with us already talking about the issue as we are. And we need to continue this discussion and interrogating all the various options. But yes, the traditional resolution fora does play a critical role, and we must onboard it so that there's a form of support that is provided to them. Thank you, Chilombo.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. We've come to the end of this session today. Thanks to everyone for your engagement and your interesting questions as well. Some of the key points from today's discussion are that there's room for a more seamless interaction between the informal and informal institutions in large-scale land acquisitions, and we also have examples that we can learn from. Communities are at the center of development projects, and it's important that the sustainability of these projects and their impact beyond their lifespan is focused on. And finally, land adjudication in Zambia remains a very complex undertaking, but there is hope for adopting practices that make the process less fragmented and a little more accessible for everyone. So I'd like to thank all the presenters for their time and for these very interesting conversations we're able to have. We'll continue the conversation tomorrow with another 4 presentations on the governance of customary and state land. So we will look at power relations in land use in Mongo. Very interesting discussions on the implication of traditional land administration in development planning in Barotse land. We'll also look at corruption in land administration and also women's land rights as economic empowerment. So the signing details are the same as today, and we'll start at 13 hours. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.